Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss a disappointing new form of Brexit-related misinformation, only this time, not from the pro-Brexit media, politicians or commentators. For me, this is even worse because it's from those who want to call out the damage of Brexit, but are in fact just harming our own cause. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as regular viewers will know, I spend a fair amount of time calling out the holes in pro-Brexit arguments and exposing misinformation in the pro-Brexit media. But every now and then, I end up having to do the same thing on the Remain or Rejoin side. And Rejoin misinformation is way worse than pro-Brexit misinformation from my point of view. The reason for this is I keep saying we need more of the public to see the damage of Brexit, and to see that, in order to reduce the damage, we don't need more Brexit, because that's what the Brexit shysters said. Oh yeah, Brexit's going very badly. What we need is actually more Brexit. No, if you want to reverse the damage, you reverse the cause of that damage, not have more. Simple enough. And who is going to have conversations with the public about the realities of Brexit? Who is going to drive this momentum we have built up towards the public seeing the damages of Brexit? Not the mainstream media. Yes, they're starting to report a bit more openly about Brexit now, but that's because they cannot afford to be out of step with the public. It was not the mainstream media that caused people to start seeing the problems with Brexit. They were doing their best to hide it. The BBC even edited out mentions of Brexit when they were talking to business owners who were struggling. We need grassroots Europhiles to familiarise themselves with the facts and then have conversations with their friends, family, strangers at events of the sort taking place this weekend. There are Rejoin events all over the country tomorrow, and I'm trying to get all my work done on a Friday so that I can get myself to Sheffield, which is my most local event. I'm not ruling out going to, because there's a few reasonably in striking distance of me, but Sheffield's the one I'm thinking of at the moment. And these events for me are really important for maintaining a visible pro-EU presence on Britain's streets. It's not supposed to be an open-air echo chamber. It needs to draw others in, to listen to the arguments, because they get precious little of that debate in the media. So if we need grassroots rejoiners to have conversations with the rest of the population, the very last thing we need is misinformation in trusted media. You know, Brexit lies in the Mail, the Telegraph, the Express, GBBs, even the BBC don't matter as much, because most rejoiners know to be critical of what they read and hear from those outlets. That's not to say it's not a problem, because they are still misinforming people in the general public. But at least rejoiners are not going to fall for it. But there are outlets that are generally trusted. And here's the thing. When you see a report that fits your worldview and is from what you consider a trusted source, you actually need to be extra critical. And that is because your own natural defences are down. If you read something, say in the Daily Mail, that you think to yourself, well, that's a load of rubbish, you know, you're naturally critical of it. And you don't necessarily, I mean, some people just dismiss it because it doesn't fit their worldview. But some people will go, right, I know this is wrong, so I will look for the evidence that it is wrong. But when you read something that fits your worldview, or the world as you would like to see it, you are much more likely to go, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Don't even need to think about it. You know, the headline speaks to what you want to believe is the truth, and therefore you are naturally inclined to uncritically accept and share it. And before I explain why I think this is a real barrier to reversing Brexit, let's look at what I particularly have in mind here. A headline in Byline Times. Byline Times is one of the very few good national media outlets. It's one of the very few I would recommend people read. Now, I still would. More importantly, it's one that is in danger of being uncritically read by rejoiners. Nothing should be uncritically read or listened to, even me. The headline. Keir Starmer could win an increased majority by turning against Brexit, but party officials are still rejecting any notion of rejoining the EU. Maybe you've seen the headline. Maybe you've shared it or seen it shared on social media without any critical comments. What does the headline suggest? That Labour would actually win more seats if they said we should rejoin the EU, even if they also had to say it would take a long time. But this is a lie. It's not just wrong, by the way. I'm not just going to pick faults with the poll. It's an actual Daily Express level lie, and I'm surprised at Byline Times for printing it. I had already read the poll several days before, so when I saw this being shared on social media, I instantly knew the headline was misleading. Because even the poll report's author did not make this claim. The poll itself does get things badly wrong as well. The poll itself is a poor one. It's quite amateurish in several ways, but I'll get onto my criticism of that in a moment. The point for now is that a headline has been published, which is the bad sort of clickbait, because the poll it refers to does not draw the conclusion stated in the headline. In fact, the poll does not even mention rejoining the EU at all. And so what is the impact? And this is why I get upset about these. So you imagine these grassroots rejoiners, absolutely vital in keeping the pressure on the current trend of the public turning against Brexit. The people who are vital in having these conversations are less likely to have those crucial conversations. Why? Because it's more effort to engage with the public than to moan at politicians for being obstinate. Easiest thing in the world to just go, oh, well, actually, it's just the politicians being arseholes. And if you allow yourself to believe that the public are already in the right place for reversing Brexit, well, I saw this poll. And it's only blinkered stubbornness in Labour that's stopping it. Of course, you're not going to put in as much effort, because it is effort, to having those conversations with the public. You know, how many times have I criticised the Tories for applying an unworkable solution to the wrong problem? It means the real problems linger. Same thing here. Politicians who are trying to win elections mirror the views of their target voters. They don't stand opposed to them. Otherwise, they will lose. There's nothing wrong with being critical of Labour's analysis of their target's voters' views. I've said many times I'd be very interested in seeing their analysis. I said it a lot when Starmer's Brexit strategy started to become apparent, all the make Brexit work stuff. I thought, well, you know, I'd like to see their analysis here. But I am also going to say I've said it a lot less since Labour pulled ahead in the poll so comprehensively, because I cannot deny that whatever they are doing is working. In the early days of Starmer's Brexit strategy, like I said, I was critical of it. I wasn't dismissive. I did even say at the time, well, they will have access to polling that I do not. But now that they're making the pitch work, you need some... It's not to say you uncritically accept Labour either, but you need some pretty robust evidence to suggest they're getting it wrong. And believing that Labour are getting it wrong just because you want them to isn't really what we call critical thinking. I would love it if Labour would win more seats by adopting an anti-Brexit position. It would be so much easier. It would be so much easier for them. They wouldn't have to tie themselves in knots with Brexit nonsense. But that's not the case. This is the same blind faith that caused Brexit in the first place. On the part of Leavers, they thought, oh yeah, of course you can have cheaper goods and boost trade by raising trade barriers. But Remainers were little better. Remainers thought that Brexit was such an obviously stupid idea that we could afford to let David Cameron, Jeremy Corbyn run the campaign and still expect to win. But anyway, enough of that. What about the poll itself? What does it actually claim then? And is it valid? The claim is actually that Labour could increase the number of seats it wins if it were to state that Brexit was a mistake. That's it. That's the poll. Nothing about changing their policies. Nothing about saying we should rejoin. Anything being reported along those lines is not something that is in the poll. It's something that others reporting on the poll have made up. They've lied. But some people may still say, well, you know, I'd still accept that if Labour would at least just explicitly state that Brexit was a mistake. Better than nothing. And, you know, if it means they win more seats, why not say it? And there is exactly the reason you should be critical of this conclusion. If all Labour had to do was say that and they'd win more seats, why wouldn't they say it? Hit the nail on the head. Of course they would say it. The fact that they're not saying it should tell you, is there something wrong with that conclusion? Because anyone looking at how Keir Starmer is operating and doubting that he's trying to win every possible seat is really deluded. Whether he gets things right or wrong, he won't get everything right. He is doing whatever is necessary to win the maximum number of seats. He and his leadership team were all working incredibly hard to prevent the UK leaving the EU right up until the end, against a Labour leader that wanted us to leave. They were swimming upstream. but they still put that effort in. It was undeniable that they wanted to stop us leaving the EU. What do people think is happening here? That Starmer and all the other champions of Remain, like David Lammy, have all suddenly turned into hardened Brexiteers, and all at the same time? And that they are all willing to risk losing seats when they desperately want to win the election for the sake of their newly found hard Brexit views? Because to believe this headline without an awful lot of proof, that's what you have to believe. But the poll itself is quite poor. I'm not going to go over all the details. I did do a script where I did, and it just went on far too long. And this video is going to end up too long anyway. But my major gripe with it is to note that the poll appears to have been, first of all, conducted by a 20-something-year-old fresh out of university. Academic background, I mean, I'm not knocking people who go to university. I'm not one of these, oh, you need the University of Life. But fresh out of university, right, with a background in politics, they've just done a PhD in politics, right? Nobody else connected with the poll, as far as I can tell. Unfortunately, there's not a list of people who worked on it, which itself is a bit funny. But anyone named on this publication, none of them have any sort of mathematical background, let alone a statistical background. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they cannot come up with a valid poll. Someone with degrees in politics or history, obviously, of course, they can still learn enough maths to conduct and analyse a reliable poll. Many do. But what we're essentially being asked to believe here is that someone fresh out of university who probably hasn't studied maths formally since he was 16 knows better than the actual pollsters which Labour hire, who are experienced and proven, that Labour hire to tell them who their target voters are and what they will vote for and against. So again, we've not got proof here that the poll is poor, but we've got an indication that we should be extra critical. And that was before I looked through their raw results, their raw data, the way they conducted the poll. So now what I'm going to say is, even if the results were analysed correctly, and actually there's a fair few indications in there that it was not, but I'm not going to bore you with mathematical details, the way the survey was conducted was poor. For example, they are claiming, their conclusion is that Labour will win more seats if they just say Brexit was a mistake. But they didn't test this assertion. They just asked an isolated question. You know, how would you vote? How would you vote if Labour were to say Brexit was a mistake? That was it. That was their survey. To test it, because some people will say, oh yeah, if this party said or did this, I would vote this way. But then when it actually happens, there's a consequence. There's a chain of consequences. So let us say Labour said Brexit's a mistake. You know, we're still going to keep the rest of our policies and statements intact. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are just going to say we'd have been better without Brexit. Would it end? I mean, Labour have implied that. Starmer, for example, regularly says, look, I voted to remain. I mean, everyone knows he voted to remain. Everyone knows he campaigned to remain. So why keep saying it? Unless he thinks to himself, he's trying to basically say to people, look, I'm not really pro-Brexit here. But they haven't explicitly said it. So let's say they say it. Would it end there? No. The Tories and Tory media would smell blood. They'd be off on it. They would make up Labour policies based on the statement. Oh, they've said this. That means these are their policies, despite what they've written down. Labour would then have to either confirm or reject what the Tories are saying. Is the extrapolation of that statement. How would voters react then? Also, it would mean Labour would be asked much more in interviews about their Brexit position. They've spent 2 years trying to stop the media always asking about Brexit so they can focus on the economy and healthcare and other things like that. What would be the impact of Labour suddenly have to talk about Brexit, therefore not having as much time to talk about their other policies? You know, we don't know, because this pollster, and I use that term charitably, didn't ask. Lots of people think Brexit was a mistake, but some of them want to rejoin the EU. Some don't. Some would just want to rejoin the single market or the customs union, or both, or neither. Some think it was a mistake, but think we're stuck with it now, and it will just do more harm to try and go back, because they'll think, oh, we'll have to adopt the euro or something like that. You've got all these different groups of people who all agree that Brexit was a mistake, but all want different trajectories. Which ones would change their vote if Labour changed their position? We don't know because the poll didn't ask. It basically made the ridiculous statement that Labour could say a thing and there would be no further movement in the public debate. The Tories would just ignore it and the media would just ignore it, and that would be... And all this amateurish research, and especially the dishonest reporting of it, because that's what I particularly don't like, is because that's deliberate. If you read a poll and you read the conclusions of the poll and then you share it on social media with your own conclusion, you make up your own conclusion, that's deliberate. And it's deeply damaging to the Rejoin movement because it's giving the grassroots false intelligence. It's telling people the problem's somewhere else, which means they go that somewhere else to apply, therefore, the wrong solution. Applying the right solution is almost impossible. And it's not like we don't have a hard enough time. Despite Brexiteers whining about a Remain establishment, there's no such thing. If there were a Remain establishment, we would have remained. The establishment in this country is the mainstream media, and it bats for Brexit. We've got enough problems as it is. We're up against it enough as it is. With Brexiteers consciously misinforming the public, and they've got the easiest access to the public. Without ourselves falling for misinformation, without a second spent wondering if that information is even correct, just because it fits our preferred worldview. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.